The sun was just beginning to rise when a small caravan of vehicles slowly moved along a dirt road that crossed a vast desert. The sky was painted with shades of orange and red, and the morning air was still cool before the heat of the day took over. Inside one of the vehicles was Daniel, a 10-year-old boy with eyes full of curiosity. It was the first time he had seen a desert so large, and to him, everything felt like an exciting adventure. He looked out the window with fascination as the sand dunes stretched all the way to the horizon like frozen waves in an immense golden sea. His father drove carefully while his mother rested lightly in her seat. The family was crossing that region to reach a new city where they would begin a new life. Daniel did not completely understand why they had to move, but he trusted his parents and was sure everything would be a new adventure. After several hours of travel, the sun began to rise higher in the sky and the desert started to change. The air grew hotter and the sunlight reflected intensely off the sand. Daniel's father decided to stop the vehicle near some rocks to check the engine and rest for a moment. When the car stopped, Daniel stepped out excitedly to stretch his legs. His mother gently reminded him not to go too far away. The boy nodded without really thinking about the danger. He walked around the rocks, watching small insects that moved quickly across the hot sand. The silence of the desert was impressive. There was no noise from cities or people, only the soft wind moving the sand. While exploring, Daniel saw a small lizard running between the rocks. The boy began to follow it curiously, moving carefully so he would not lose sight of it. The lizard climbed a small dune and disappeared on the other side. Driven by curiosity, Daniel climbed after it. When he reached the top of the dune, he looked around for the little animal, but could not find it. Then he decided to look back to return to his parents. At that moment, his heart jumped. The car was no longer visible. The dune completely blocked the view of where his parents had been. At first, Daniel did not worry too much. He thought he only needed to walk a little and he would find the way back. He went down the other side of the dune and walked a few meters, but the landscape looked completely different. Tall dunes stretched in every direction, and there were no rocks or signs showing the way back. Daniel began to walk a little faster, looking around with growing concern. He tried to remember which direction he had come from, but all the dunes looked the same. The desert wind had already erased his footprints in the sand. Then he shouted loudly for his mother and father. His voice disappeared into the vast desert. No one answered. Fear slowly began to appear in his mind. Daniel realized that he was completely alone. The sun kept rising and the heat started to become stronger and stronger. The boy looked inside his small backpack and found only a cap, a cereal bar, and a small notebook. He had no water. The situation began to seem much more dangerous than he had imagined. For a few minutes, he felt the urge to run desperately in every direction, but he remembered something he had seen in a survival program he used to watch with his father. Running in the desert only makes a person tire faster and lose more energy. He took several deep breaths to calm himself down. He decided to climb the highest dune he could see in order to try to orient himself. The climb was difficult because the sand sunk under his feet and every step upward seemed to slide back down. When he finally reached the top, he looked around with hope, but all he saw was endless sand in every direction. The horizon was empty. There were no cars, no houses, no people, only the immense silence of the desert. Despite the fear, Daniel decided not to cry. He knew he needed to think calmly if he wanted to survive. In the distance, he saw some dark rocks rising from the sand. They were not too far away, so he decided to walk toward them to find shade. The sun was already high, and the heat was becoming more intense. When he finally reached the rocks, he found a small patch of shade where he could sit and rest. The relief was immediate. He took the cereal bar out of his backpack and decided to eat only a small piece to save the rest for later. He knew he had to ration his food. The midday hours were extremely difficult. The heat was so strong that the air seemed to shimmer above the sand. Daniel felt his throat becoming drier and his lips starting to feel rough. When the sun began to sink toward the horizon, the desert started to cool a little. Daniel decided to walk again. He knew that moving during the cooler hours of the day was better than walking under the strong sun. He chose a direction and began to walk slowly. Sometimes he thought he saw something in the distance, a house, a tree, a road, but when he got closer, the images disappeared. They were mirages created by the heat. Night finally arrived, and the desert changed completely. The heat disappeared, and the air became cold. Daniel curled up between some rocks to protect himself from the wind. He looked up at the sky and saw more stars than he had ever seen in his life. The desert sky seemed infinite. The second day was even harder. Daniel was tired, and his throat was extremely dry. He walked slowly to conserve energy. Every step was difficult, but something inside him refused to give up.
Look at that rock.
He remembered the words his father often told him, "The mind can be stronger than the body."
This is incredible.
That thought helped him keep going.
I need
During
to
one of
draw
his
this.
pauses, he saw something in the sand that gave him hope. Tire tracks. They were not recent, but they showed that a vehicle had passed through that area at some point. Daniel decided to follow that direction in hopes of finding help. The third day was the hardest of all. Daniel was weak, his lips were cracked, and his legs could barely support him. But then he saw something on the horizon that looked different. A dark line that
look
did
at
not
that
move
view.
like the mirages. He
Breathtaking.
walked slowly toward it, with little energy but a lot of
Yes,
hope.
let's go
Piece by
explore.
piece, the shape became clearer. They were trees. Where there are trees in a desert,
Wow,
there is
look
almost
at those
always
huge
water.
dudes.
Daniel gathered the
It's
last of his
so
strength
wide.
and walked
Sun
toward them.
makes every
Finally,
block.
he reached a small
I could
oasis
make
hidden among the
slogans
dunes.
forever.
There was
I would
water.
like to draw.
Daniel fell to his knees beside the water and began to drink slowly. He knew he should not drink too quickly. After drinking a little, he lay down under the shade of a palm tree and felt an immense sense of relief. Hours later, while resting, he heard a distant sound that seemed impossible. It was the sound of an engine. Daniel quickly stood up and began waving his cap in the air. A rescue team appeared in the distance. It was a rescue team that had been searching for him for several days. When they finally found him, the boy was exhausted, dirty, and dehydrated, but he was alive. The rescuers could hardly believe that such a young boy had survived alone in the desert for so many days. When Daniel finally saw his parents again, the hug was so strong that none of them could speak for many minutes. That experience changed his life forever, and the story of the boy who survived the desert became a symbol of courage, intelligence, and hope, even in the most difficult places in the world.